Hey, welcome to another episode of Rounding Thirds. So, you have a vision for your podcast. You want to engage, inform, maybe inspire a little bit. But the question mark remains for a lot of people. Should I fly solo or should I bring in a co host to share along the journey of executing my show? Well, on today's episode, we're going to help you navigate the podcasting process, peel back the curtain to reveal kind of what happens when our clients choose collaboration over going it alone. We'll talk about the benefits, the hurdles, and everything in between. Stay tuned. Let's get to it.
Here at Third Wheel Media, we help you navigate the world of radio, podcasting, and video so that you can hit a home run with your content. On this podcast, we'll give you a behind-the-scenes look at what we do. This is Rounding Third, Conversations in Modern Media.
So should you do your own show all by yourself like me right now, or should you bring in a co-host? Hey, Ben, how's it going?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be on the show with you right now, Walter.
That was a very like Chris Collinsworth-esque, the old slide that he does on Monday Night Football.
You have to be a football fan probably to get that reference, but
yeah,
still works.
A few will get that. Yeah, I think so.
Good topic though today, I think, because this is what we do, right? Me and you and I are both co-hosts for a number of different shows and business owners, and it is a great conversation. When we even have back and forth, should we be providing the co-host? How can we be better co-hosts? How can we provide more value that way? It's something we discuss not just with clients, but amongst ourselves.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's also something that, I don't know, what you would expect the answer to be doesn't always necessarily end up being the case. We've had people before who want to use a co-host, and then they have plans of going solo at some point, and then after doing a show with a co-host for a little while, they're like, I kind of like this, and so they'll actually never go to doing the solo route. Others have never thought about doing the solo route. We suggest it because we think they might have the chops and it might be a good fit for what they're trying to accomplish. And they're like, well, I never thought about it. I don't think I've got the skill for it. And then we go through it and it turns out they're great at it and that it is a good fit. It's a needle mover for them. So sometimes it's not always what your preconceived notion of what the right answer is going to be will be what bears fruit. But it's it's always a fun and interesting discussion to go down the line with people.
Yeah, and it's one that you need to think about because it can and will impact your show, right? It's going to have a big impact on the way you sound, how consistent you can be. Do you get your message across effectively? All these things are an important part of putting a show together.
Now, I do feel like we should define co-host here, Ben, because there are sort of two ways to, I think of a co-host. One would be where we're involved, right? We're talking about specifically our clients. They're using us to help host the show with them. So let's just say you're a realtor. You're a real estate agent, and you're like, I want to do a podcast, but I have no idea how to host. It would be great if I could have somebody help show me the ropes and guide me, and I can just be the expert and show up. So that's how we kind of think of co-hosting that way. Other people may think of hearing co-host, and they may think, okay, well, I'm a financial advisor, and I have 3 other advisors in my practice. Should we all co-host a show together? And that conversation may still include us as a co-host in that scenario. So I kind of feel like we should maybe break this into two. One where we're just talking about specifically maybe having a professional host guide you, and then also whether it makes sense, maybe a sidebar at the end. Does it make sense to have multiple people from your business on a show, or should it just be one person that gets that visibility?
Yeah, I think those are two fair discussions. I think the most common one is going to be, do you want to have somebody that's a professional that can help you get in and out of shows, provide you some guidance, and just be kind of the person, I won't say handholder, but can walk you through. But the biggest part is just making you the expert, right? So some of the benefits, I think, with going solo versus having the co-host, we'll save the co-host part to the end, because there are plenty of benefits for going solo, right? Because for many people, they can do it. And even if you're not perfect, that's what the editors are for. We got great editors, right? And that's part of it. Like, you can stumble your way through a 15-minute show. It might take you 45 minutes to record it. Literally, I mean, I've seen this happen before, and it comes out crystal clear, right? And the message gets across perfectly. So, even if you don't have a coach, you can still get through it. But I think number one for me is just being able to control your own schedule, right? Get in, hey, I've got a day where I can knock out 4 shows, or hey, I just have 15 minutes I can hop on. It's a little bit harder when you're working with someone and you got to get them basically like line up your schedule, but also you don't want to often do just a one-off. You want to try to get a couple shows together done at the same time, just so you're making the best use of your time and you're not having to connect over and over and over again. So I think that's number one for me.
Definitely. I mean, us recording this show today, Ben, right? We had to find time on each other's calendars between all the other things we're doing to be able to knock it out. So if you were just going to do this episode on your own, it would have been much easier. You might have gotten it done sooner, being able to control your own schedule, or vice versa. So yeah, just it's a common sense thing, right? Being able to just hop in, hit record, do your own thing, and be done with it is sometimes sometimes a little bit easier than having a co-host. As we'll find out in the downsides, or the co-host benefits, this does have another side to the coin, but we'll save that for a few minutes. I think it also gives you control of your show, though, Ben. If you're a solo person, you're handling it internally, the recording of your show and the development of your show, all those kinds of things. You don't really have anybody else like telling you what you should do. You get to make all of those choices. You get to say exactly and frame exactly how you want things said. I'm reminded of a client that we had several years ago who, whenever I would introduce the show, would say like, no, don't say it like that. Say it like this. So, basically scripted out everything I was going to say. And my role as the co-host was so reduced at that point. And I was like, you know what? You really like having control over how everything's worded. And if you really want it this scripted, you really don't need me. You should just do a solo show. And that's one of those examples where it ended up being I wasn't offended. It was like, fine, this is the level of control that you want. And honestly, you've got the chops for it, and you're already doing the work. You don't need another voice saying these things. You can just take it all on your own, and it's going to be a great show. You'll have that much more prowess and flexibility with it. So that was another great example of where solo made sense in that case. Yeah,
and if you get to that point, if you're having that discussion, then it's a very easy shift to go solo, right? I mean, for the most part, because we've done this so many times and we've recorded so many shows, there aren't that many times, and maybe you disagree or maybe you have a different experience. There aren't that many times where somebody says, whoa, let's present the conversation a little bit differently. Like, we've gotten to a point where we are experts, not only just with the hosting, but we're experts in the subject matter too over time, right? I mean, I
could play a financial advisor on the radio, and I've done enough real estate shows at this point to probably, I could probably have a good battle with some real estate agents out there on, how to handle certain situations, just from the knowledge I've picked up from working with some really sharp people over the years.
I always use the example, I could go to a convention of whatever profession, right? Like financial advisors. I could go to a financial advisor convention if there is one. I don't know if there is one that exists, or if it's just a kind of a getaway where, advisors from around the country under the same FMO or something go somewhere. And I feel like I could show up, play the part of an advisor by just having the conversations about what's topical, what are we discussing with our clients right now, what are the main things, the priorities at your business. I feel like I could have all those conversations. I might not be able to sit down with you and build your plan right now, but I could sit in with advisors and just have that conversation like I'm just one of the guys or one of the girls.
You could handle the emotional component of the financial planning process, it sounds like.
Absolutely, right? And the same way with the real estate agent, right? You could go there and estate planning attorneys. I work with a couple there too. Same type of thing where I could go in and have, that one's a little bit more into the weeds than the financial advisor. There's a lot more details, obviously the legal side of it. It's a little bit different.
And each state's a little bit different versus kind of a little bit more national approach on some of the
still feel like
stuff.
I could talk about it with some relative intellect, I think. So another benefit there. And of course, right, you're more authoritative, I think, too, if you are in control of the show. Not that if you're hosting or I'm hosting with someone, we take away that spotlight. It's actually the opposite, probably. We shine the spotlight probably brighter on someone when we're a co-host because we present them as the expert. When you do it by yourself, you can't do that quite as much. But it is.
I think that I want to expand on that one, Ben, because you bring up a good point. And I think that's where kind of trying to get to know the client a little bit and then pick up on where maybe things aren't as smooth as they could be with a client, or where maybe there's just something being left on the table for a particular client. And where I've seen that is some people have the personality where if they're kind of just sitting back, they're being lobbed questions, they're just not quite developing that. It's a very intangible thing, but they're just not quite developing that voice because they're just sort of in this question and answer mode. You take that same person and put them in the environment where they're by themselves and they're saying, hey, welcome to the show. They're taking on that authoritative solo voice. It's all on them to carry the show. Sometimes that additional pressure, that change in dynamic can actually then make the person a better advice giver, a better host, a better expert, because now they're having to position and tailor the entire show rather than just being lobbed the questions. So that's why another reason sometimes people do benefit from the solo show, because it helps kind of unlock that hidden piece of their personality. It is more rare, though, that's truly hidden. If I can keep going for a moment, the people that tend to be good fits for solo shows, Ben, often come to me at the very beginning of the process and say, I want to host on my own. Or they have that confidence, or they already have that in mind. It kind of just shows they're already thinking and have that confidence level and maybe want to be that authority, versus folks who want that person to guide them. They're just like, I don't want all that responsibility. So sometimes just like someone's own personality on the front end kind of takes care of that. But we have seen times where that changes over time as people get more comfortable with the format. It helps us see through, okay, you actually have the chops to do some solo episodes. And you've had people end up doing both, right? Where they kind of go and they do a couple episodes with you, they do a couple of solo episodes. It kind of mixes up the show a little bit, and that's kind of a neat dynamic.
Whatever the topic is, or just the way you present it a little bit differently, and vice versa. Like you start them, you get them going, and then they go, what? I can do what you guys do, and take it over, and they do a great job. And ultimately, I enjoy being a co-host. I know you do too, and
Yeah.
I think the advisor we work with appreciate the service and value it, but also think that if you're able to do it on your own, it is a stronger voice, right? Because you are the expert and you are in control, and I think it just is a little bit better when everything's coming from your voice versus just the answers. But right, if you're able to speak on what the context of the conversation's about, right, you're always going to set it up better than you or I will, because you know what the issue is, you know how it affects the people you work with, and you can present that a little bit more effectively and more genuine, more authentic. Than we can too. So
you're also introducing to your business and to your clients and prospects another face, another voice. And do you want that? Ben and I are great guys. Why wouldn't you want us as part of your team, co-hosting and helping you? But you may say, it's just it's not the vision that I want clients to have. I want them to only see me. I want them to only hear me. Sometimes that's important, and that's okay, and that can be a good thing. So doing a solo show, you're not sharing that spotlight in any way. You're again kind of managing all of that presence. Is totally on you and your shoulders, and that may be the way that you want to operate. At the same time, some people have a co-host on the show and develop such a good rapport. We almost sound like, for financial advisors or whatever it may be, we almost sound like we're part of the team, right? Mm-hmm. Especially over time, as that chemistry gets better and all of that stuff starts happening. It can be really fun. I've got a client who's based out of Michigan, and he all the time is getting people saying, where's Walt's office, when they come in to meet with him, because they think I'm there and that I'm part of the team. And he's like, I don't know, I've never met Walt like in person. We've only ever talked online. And they're like, what? That's crazy. But that's the amount of chemistry that gets built up, and it's just kind of a neat dynamic that you otherwise wouldn't get if you were solo. So we shaped these as sort of like benefits, downsides, pros, and cons. Really, they're none of that. It's really just kind of, we're driving, I think, here toward being the right fit for what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. I will say, Ben, solo hosting, you might save a few dollars, right? If you're not using a professional to help guide you, there's typically a couple of dollars of savings there. You're not paying for that time and that expertise. Yeah. Again, it's not, a right or wrong thing. That's the trade-off. You're not getting that real-time guidance, but you're also not paying for somebody to be there with you.
Yeah. Well, let's shift then to the downsides. And I'm going to give you the number one downside is by a landslide too. It's accountability. Even the people that are great at doing it solo, that sound great, natural, coming in and out of a show, can transition the topics, can get their point across, get out, not just waste a lot of time. They sometimes find it very difficult to get those things recorded. That's the hardest thing, is to actually find the time, because a month goes by quickly. You knock out a couple shows, and all of a sudden you go, wait, I got another recording already next week. So having a co-host that's on your calendar, I've got a standing second Tuesday of the month at 2:00 in the afternoon. I know that Walter's going to show up. I'm going to have to be there because I don't want to call him again and tell him I got to reschedule. Or just, hey, I'm glad that it's on the schedule. I can hop on there. I know he's going to be there. We can knock it out. I can go about my day, take care of the rest of my business. But that, to me, is number one, because we see people all the time start strong and then quickly fade trying to keep up with it on their own.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. It's something psychological, right? Because it actually in the real world, or in theory, it doesn't change anything. You could still, even if you have an appointment with us scheduled to do your show, you could still cancel that 15 times in a row, just like you would if you were going to record on your own. But there just is something to that accountability when you have a partner to talk to. You know that you're, maybe part of it's, you know, you're going to have a little help getting through the show. So if I had just recently, a client was a little sick. If they were solo, they wouldn't have recorded, but they were like, you might need to just carry a little bit more of the episode today, but we'll push through, we'll make it happen. Mm-hmm. And so by just having that co-host to help push through and make the shows happen, otherwise it wouldn't have if they had been a solo person. So that's a big difference, I think. And so I think this is a really good example of also how, you know, if you're having a day where you're not feeling well, or whatever the equivalent of writer's block is for a podcaster, you know, voice block or talk block or content block or whatever it may be, you know, you can overcome that by having another person to lean on a little bit. So it's just a big helper, I think, for a lot of people to just have that mental knowledge that they've got something on the calendar and somebody that they need to talk to.
Yeah, it's just with anything with life, you can always find an excuse not to do something. There's always something more important right now in the moment to knock out. The podcast can wait. I can definitely do it. Thursday is wide open. I'll do it Thursday. And then all of a sudden something pops up Thursday, and you know, you got to take care of that, and that becomes the priority for that day. Yeah. Or it's a beautiful day. Well, I want to go play a little bit of golf this afternoon. Yes. The podcast can wait till next week, right? I've still got this month's cover anyway. It's just, you can keep kicking that can down the road a little bit, but having somebody there, you're much more likely to say, let me just go ahead and take care of this. It's on the schedule. We'll get it done, and I'll go on with something else. So, and
someone might say, so what's the big deal? Like, if I just don't do a show for a month and then I get back to it, what's the big deal? What's the consequence of not doing that? Well, one, I mean, you want content to be created. Two, consistency is really important. Whether you're doing a YouTube channel or a traditional podcast or some combination of the two, consistency of getting material out there is really, really important. If you aren't getting into a consistent routine of publishing that material, it will hurt your show in the long run. Very few shows can have success where they're just intermittently releasing material. Especially in the early going. In your first couple of years of podcasting, consistency is really important while you're building up an initial audience, building up your library. And this is the other thing too, like, consistency is not contagious. Inconsistency is. And so if you start to get a little inconsistent, it likely leads to a lot of inconsistency. And that is what ultimately leads people to just then the show failing and not continuing and stopping after X amount of episodes. So trying to get into those regular habits is really important. Also, if you're regularly and consistently doing the shows, you're going to get better faster than if you're inconsistently producing that content.
Yeah, I was trying to remember what the stat is. I think I've seen it or heard it before, but the average podcast stops after like 3 episodes or something like that. I don't know what the number is, but it's something like that points to that, right? It's, I get started, then I get inconsistent for a while, I stop for a while, then I say, it's not working.
Yeah, I don't remember the stat either. It's been a while since I looked at it, but I know exactly what you're talking about. If you go to Apple Podcasts, like, there are way more shows that stopped before getting past episode 3 than there are shows that, you know, have 4 episodes or more. Like, it's astronomical how many shows have tried to start and never even got past episode 3. And if you make it 10 episodes, it's even more dramatic how many shows never make it past that mark. Mm-hmm. So, and this is where I know we're going to get into some of the co-host benefits here in a moment and talk a little bit more of that side of the equation, but I'll mention it now. Like, just looking at our own client base and the clients that we've worked with over the last decade, those who use a co-host have a much higher rate of doing a show for many years than those who do a solo show. Mm-hmm. And it's just because of that execution is just harder to do all by yourself. We have a couple of shows that are solo hosted that have been around for a long time, but they have really good teams, really good processes to make sure that they're consistently doing content. But for the most part, a lot of the solo hosted shows just don't last super long. So it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, if you're good at it, great. But there are some things to be concerned about if you are worried about some of these issues, your show could fizzle fast.
Yeah. Last downside on the solo side, Ben, would, and this is a smaller one, but still something to consider. You don't have as much immediate help with tech issues. So if you're recording on your own and you go to record and your microphone's not working, or just you're more vulnerable to tech issues, right? You think your microphone's working, but it's not working. That's that happens. And then you spend an hour recording material, you go to send it in, and nothing got recorded, or it got recorded on the wrong microphone, and it's not usable quality. So there's a lot more of that. Like there's a bigger learning curve doing it on your own, and a lot more tech issues that can pop up randomly. Even people who've been doing shows for years will sometimes still get bitten by that tech monster. Mm-hmm. And so working with a co-host, you actually have somebody that's helping manage that part of the process. And let's use that as our transition into talking about working with a co-host and some of the benefits there. Yeah, it just makes the process overall much easier from a tech standpoint, conversational back and forth, the accountability that you mentioned a little bit earlier. And I would venture a guess that people that use a co-host, Ben, probably don't have to prep as much just because they know they're not going to have to carry the entire show and handle all those nuts and bolts.
Well, that's the whole reason that we offer that service, is because we want to make it as seamless as possible. Like if you all you want to put into a podcast a month is an hour and have a show that sounds great, is up every 2 weeks, right? Consistently published, and it's everywhere it needs to be. It's probably on your website too, but you only want to spend an hour. You're not gonna be able to do that on your own. This is absolutely impossible to do on your own, but we can do it. And that's part of that process, right? Is just taking all that away. So, I mean, you get busy, and there are times, thankfully you're talking about a subject that you're an expert on, so you don't have to prep. Now, yeah, it's great to have a couple stories to bring to the table. You might need to think through that. Okay, did I have this situation recently? What's a good example that I could use? Think through a few of those. But there's also times when I have someone that pulls up at, we got a 12 o'clock recording. They show up at 12 o'clock and go, all right, I've not looked at the notes this month. Let me just quickly pick out a couple of shows and let's go. And you're off and running. And it's as simple as that. So really, it's up to you how much time you want to put into it. But that is a good thing about having a co-host, is if you're really busy, but you want to get the show done, you have someone there to kind of carry that weight for you.
Yep, I think you're great. Not only the time savings, the turnkey nature of it all, but the professional quality that you mentioned, I think, is huge, because that's why we want to be here for you. Anybody can grab their phone and talk into it and try and do a podcast, right, Ben? Like, we're not trying to pretend that you can't do this stuff on your own. Mm-hmm. It can be done, but to what quality are you going to get out of doing it on your own? How much time is it going to take you to do all of that? Is it worth it to outsource some of those pieces of the puzzle? And that's where we often try to solve that by providing a co-host who really, Ben, our co-hosts don't just serve as someone to talk to. There's someone to make sure that you're looking good professionally on video, that you're sounding good from an audio quality standpoint, to even give you tips and advice on answering questions. How can you take this in a new direction? What are you thinking about with this piece of content? Hey, you messed up during that description. Instead of just rolling with that mess up, why don't we pause for a second, go back and re-say that so that it's nice and clear to the audience? How can we improve calls to action? You really are getting a partner when you have kind of a co-host in those scenarios that's going to help guide you through all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of almost a different discussion, because co-host is it seems very narrow in scope, and there are probably places you can find a co-host that just truly is somebody that just reads off a script and sits there with you. But I think what we do is much, much broader. So it's not, I mean, we could go into the number of benefits, because there's plenty of coaching that's involved in that process too.
Sure.
So there's more of that.
There's a producer element to it as well.
So maybe that discussion is a little bit different than what we're on for somebody that's just truly trying to find someone. But that is a big part of what we do, and something we take pride in is being able to kind of help with all those little things, not just hop on, okay, question 1, Walter, what do you think about this, right? It's somebody that can, okay, that sounded good. I think next episode, let's try to do this, or here's the topic we haven't discussed in a while. It'd be fun to do that. Or hey, let's change up the way we start the show. Let's add an intro, or let's voice a quick tease of what's coming up, or let's have you do that, or just trying to continue to evolve the show and improve it. I think is a big part of that.
Yeah, it helps it keep from becoming stale, for sure. And maybe last point, and I feel like this one falls in both categories as both a downside and a benefit, would be chemistry. So if you do a show with a co-host, are you going to have chemistry with that person? So that could be a benefit if you have great chemistry to where your audience thinks that co-host is part of your company and part of your business, like we've seen happen many times before. Or you're getting comments from people that listen to your show saying, oh, I love that guy's voice that you have on with you. We get that one a lot. Or, oh, it sounds like you guys are recording in a professional studio. Like those are great signs that the co-host model is working well for you. The downside could be this one's really rare. I mean,
I was going to say, do you have examples of people that have been like, I can't work with Walter anymore? This is a little rough.
I don't know.
Or I guess vice versa too.
I feel like you're a lot like me, and I feel like most of the people that are on our third wheel team, right? If we're limiting the scope of the conversation to that, we're really good at adapting to different personalities and having. I feel like our whole team is made up of people that are just as comfortable at the symphony as they are at the ball game. You know, that kind of mentality. Like we have a wide range of personalities and subject matter. It is kind of funny. We've had it's been a while, but we used to do a thing kind of back in the early days of Third Wheel. We used to do a thing where when someone would start up a show, they would do their first show with one co-host, their second show with another co-host, and their third show with a third co-host, and then kind of pick their favorite. So we did have a couple of things very early on where I remember one specifically, I did the first interview. No, I think John did the first interview, and the guy said, okay, that was great. That was awesome. I can't imagine that going any better. And then I recorded with the person the next week, and they were like, whoa, you were way better than John. That's amazing. I love this. And then the third one interviewed with Mark, and they were like, okay, yeah, hands down, you're my favorite. That other guy was boring. Like, you're awesome. I'm going to record with you. So their chemistry got along swimmingly with Mark. I've had others where they did one session with Mark and said, never give me that guy again. And it's like, okay. And then it's just
I know
me
you've
from
evolved,
there,
and I think part of that too now is when somebody comes on as considering a coach, you do give them the option. We don't actually interview with them, but you give them a sample of what I sound like, or what Mark sound like, or what you sound like, just so they can kind of get a feel for who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we don't quite do the whole like trial run co-host, but if somebody got a couple of episodes in and they felt like their chemistry wasn't matching, or even if we felt like, hey, we made a bad choice on co-host here and the chemistry is just not there, I think that's where like our relationship and our conversation and communication needs to be strong enough to be able to say, hey, something's not quite right here. How can we change it up? Rather than just living with it unhappily. And so I think that's really important to keep in mind with any conversation about a co-host or doing a show on your own is just, sometimes things are trial runs, but we run into that problem very minimally, Ben. So it's not a huge downside. So I would say the chemistry thing is definitely more in the plus category most of the time.
Our answers will always kind of go down to, depends on what your goals are. Like I almost feel like it's like a financial advisor it depends, right? Like that's the common beginning to an answer, but it truly is the case, right? So there are one way or the other is not right or wrong. There's benefits to both, downsides to both, things to think about, and really whatever your goal for the show is will probably help us determine what answer it should be. But the beauty of having a co-host, for this episode, Walter, you brought us in, you sounded great off the top. My job here is done, right? I can just slide out and be done with the show, and you can close it out, and I can go about my day.
He's disappearing again. He's gone. All right, so there you go. So I'm back to the solo mode. It's all on me again. No, I appreciate Ben's help guiding us through through some of this expert conversation today about co-hosts. Go at it on your own. We would be happy to help you through this kind of conversation. These are the kinds of things that we talk about in our initial consultations, whether you're looking to do podcasting, YouTube videos, a series, some mix of those things. Maybe it's radio you're interested in. We work with small business owners of all types. And so if you're interested in using these kinds of mediums to grow your business, to meet new people, to serve your current clients and prospects, we'll help you find the right solution for your business. And not just the right solution of where to have your show and how to do your show, but even should you have a co-host? Should you do it on your own? What's the best way to execute it all? It's all part of the process. So don't hesitate to reach out if you've got any questions at all. You can actually book a time with me to have a free consultation if you want. Just go to talkwithwalter.com talkwithwalt.com, and you can schedule a time to visit there, talkwithwalt.com, or you can go online to thirdwheelmedia.com to find out more information there as well. And don't forget to like and subscribe this video. See, Ben left me all alone, and I just can't stop talking. I just keep going on and on. I need a co-host to keep me talking a little shorter there, so that would be my preference if I were starting a show. Come back, Ben. I need you.